Welcome everyone to our fifth snow leopard webinar. We're really pleased today to introduce our speakers from a country that has pioneered conservation and research of snow leopards. From the early days of the 1970s, Nepal's snow leopard efforts really provide a unique perspective of almost now it must be 5 decades of conservation work and more. So we are very pleased to have our guests today that bring together past, present, and future of snow leopard conservation across Nepal. So we have our main speaker, Gopal, and he's joining us from a remote region or more remote region of Western Nepal, near the field station of where there were some very early efforts of snow leopard surveys. We also have Som Ale, who's a member of the Snow Leopard Network Committee, and he is also one of the early pioneers of snow leopard conservation in Nepal. So we are really delighted to bring together these two perspectives and these two experts to join us and share with us at the Snow Leopard Network. And just a reminder, Gopal will first present for around 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll go into a discussion section where both Som and Al will, and Gopal will join. So if you have any questions throughout the talk or during the discussion section, please feel free to write it in the chat. And please, during the talk, keep your mic muted. And we have Raki here, who is the Snow Leopard Network coordinator, who's here to support with any questions or anything you need during the chat if there's any concerns. So without any more delay, I would like to pass it on to Gopal for his presentation. So thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Justin, for the nice introduction, and thank you all of who have joined this webinar today. Som sir and I would like to welcome you all in this webinar titled Snow Leopard Conservation in Nepal, Past, Present and Future. So I'm sure some of you might be curious to know where I am speaking from, right? This is the place where I am right now. It's a Shey Phoksundo National Park, the largest national park in Nepal, with an area of nearly 4,000 square kilometers and home to a significant population of snow leopard. So right now I was supposed to be at Suligad, Dolpa. It's a district headquarters. It's a Suligad, it's a park headquarters, which is about 7,000 feet above from the mean sea level. Unfortunately, due to the severe internet problem, I am right now at the Dunay. It's a district headquarters, some 5-6 kilometers far from my working station at Suligad. I was supposed to be at Suligad right now. So the Shey Phoksundo National Park is the largest national park in Nepal. As I already mentioned, the name Shey comes from the Shey Phoksundo. Shey comes from the renowned Buddhist monastery established in 12th century. And the Phoksundo comes from the lake. It is listed in Ramsar site. So yeah, I also want to tell you about how snow leopard habitat looks like in Nepal. So we have two prominent types of habitat. It's a Himalayan habitat and the trans-Himalayan habitat. Himalayan habitat occurs below the tree line up to around 4,000 meters in elevation, and the trans-Himalayan habitat occurs above the tree line, and it's essential rain shadow zone in Nepal. So let me start today's discussion with a brief outline of the webinar. I will start by sharing you with an overview of snow leopard conservation in Nepal. I will then take you back in time starting from 1970s when studies on snow leopard were started in the wild. I will briefly touch upon what is being done for snow leopard research in Nepal currently in terms of both research and conservation. I will also outline main challenges to snow leopard conservation in Nepal. I will then discuss the opportunities brought up by the advent of technologies and expertise over the years. Then I will discuss some potential way forward to overcome the challenges that we have encountered towards snow leopard conservation. So let me start sharing the overview of the snow leopard conservation in Nepal. Nepal is estimated to harbor some 300 to 400 snow leopard, roughly spread over around 13,000 square kilometer habitat of 10 mountain protected areas. And it is estimated that the 30%, around 30% of snow leopard habitat lies outside the protected area. And for the management convenience, government has divided the snow leopard habitat into 3 administrative units, 3 snow leopard landscapes. It is the eastern landscapes in the eastern Nepal, and there is a central landscape in the central Nepal, and there is large western landscapes in the western Nepal. So it is estimated that central eastern landscape has some 2 snow leopards per 100 square kilometer. Central landscape is estimated to have lowest density of snow leopards in Nepal, some 1.5 snow leopards per 100 square kilometer. And the western landscape is estimated to have the highest density of snow leopards in Nepal, some 3 snow leopards per 100 square kilometer. So snow leopard is legally protected in Nepal. Any form of poaching or illegal trade is strictly prohibited. And any offense related to snow leopard could be up to like 15 years of jail sentence. And snow leopard is revered as the pets of the god in the Himalayas, and has cultural affinity in Buddhist communities. So let me take you back in 1970s. Have you read any of these books? I am sure most of you had. It gives so much pleasure to be born in a country that produce such important books. I think these books simply don't need my introduction and explanation. These books are most influential books in the history of snow leopard research and conservation. Like Mountain Monarchs and Peter Matthewson's Snow Leopard, and Darla Hillard's Vanishing Tracks. These are the very important books. Can you guess when was this photo taken and where? And can you guess who is this person? Well, if you have guessed correctly, this is George Saller in his 40s in 1973 in Dolpa, where he studied behavior of wild sheep and goats. He wrote the book in Mountain Monarchs. That was the result of his natural history work. This was the first of its kind natural history work on snow leopard in Nepal. And the findings of this study later helped government to recognize the importance of this Dolpo landscape and establish a national park in 1984. Okay, do you know this person? Let me show you some more photos so that you can guess. Well, of course, if you are familiar with the history of snow leopard research, this is Dr. Rodney Jackson in 1982 in Mugu. Mugu is adjacent to the Dolpa. So conducting his first radio telemetry study on snow leopards in the wild, and with field support by Professor Karan Shah of Tribhuvan University of Nepal. So I would say this is one of the key milestones in snow leopard research in Nepal. The finding of this study greatly improved our understanding of basic ecology and behavior of snow leopard. Over the 4 years, 1980 to 1986, Rodney collared some five snow leopards and tracked their movement to gain in-depth information on their home range, movement, and ranging behavior. And I hope you have seen this National Geographic photo that appeared in 1986 issue. It's from the Mugu. The photo is from the Rodney's work. Yeah, with these key moments of history of snow leopard research in Nepal, let me quickly track the history of snow leopard research in Nepal. In 1970s, studies on snow leopard in Nepal started with a basic natural history study in 1970s and 1990s. This is when Rodney Jackson and George Saller trekked Nepal and conducted first ever studies on snow leopard. Between 2000 and 2010, more field studies using science surveys were conducted, and this resulted in nationwide population estimation using science surveys. And the population estimates of Nepal, the current population estimates that we use, 300 to 400 snow leopard in Nepal, was based on this 2009 nationwide population estimation survey using the science survey method. And between 2010 and 2013, more studies were conducted using non-invasive genetic study of snow leopard scats collected from the field, and camera trap studies were started taking place in this period. After 2013, application of cutting is like the technologies like use of GPS collars and the camera traps will gain prominence with so far 6 snow leopards collared in Nepal, and the camera traps study is being conducted in some 5,000 square kilometer area, but by different researchers and different period of time. So some 30 to 40% of the snow leopard habitat has been surveyed at least with using like science surveys or the camera traps. So here are the photos of the 6 snow leopards that has been collared with the GPS collars so far in Nepal. And these collaring expeditions have generated a wealth of information over the years. And you can see the 6 snow leopards in this photo. And sorry. Oh God, again. So the first 2 photos were the Som Ale and Jeborang that were recently collared in 2019 in November. So I was fortunate enough to be part of this expedition. We collared 2 snow leopards in Shey Phoksundo National Park, Gopal. These 2 snow leopards, and I just want to share how the snow leopard habitat looks like in this landscape. This is the landscape where we collared Som Ale and Jeborang. Those two first photos were of Som Ale and Jeborang that we collared in Shey Phoksundo National Park. And this is the landscape. It's very near to Bhijair village. It's a small human settlement, and this is how habitat looks like. And this is the collaring team. With some background on snow leopard research in Nepal over the years, let me quickly tell you some of the recent research on snow leopard in Nepal that I know best. Well, there have been lots of studies on snow leopard over the years, and there are many researchers who have been like continuously working on snow leopards. Unfortunately, I won't be able to cover all of these research. I will just focus on 3 key research that I know well. So the first one is. So recently, Shey Phoksundo National Park, Dolpa, with support from Department and WWF Nepal, completed largest ever of its kinds of survey on snow leopard in Nepal, with using some 300 camera traps. It covered some 5,000 square kilometer area in 6 blocks of the snow leopard in Shey Phoksundo National Park. The data are being analyzed, and this study will provide some like the best available like robust estimate of snow leopard population in this park. Another study that I am little bit more aware of was conducted back in 2014 and 15 in central landscape of Nepal by Chetri and colleagues. They employed a non-invasive genetic study and to estimate the abundance of snow leopard. So what they found was the estimated snow leopard density was some 1 snow leopards per 100 square kilometer in central landscape. So last but not the least, I am aware of some very nice study conducted by Kanchenjunga Conservation Area in the eastern Nepal with support from WWF Nepal and department. So over the years of 2013 and between 2013 and 16, team collared 4 snow leopards. While the peer-reviewed publication of these studies are yet to be available, the preliminary findings of these studies suggest that 2 of the 4 snow leopards moved over 1,000 kilometers in the air. With maybe these are the dispersing individuals, and 3 of the 4 collared snow leopards showed transboundary movement between Nepal, China, and India. This demonstrates the importance of like the transboundary collaboration for the snow leopard conservation, with significant movement in India. The red colors boxes indicates the movement of these 3 snow leopards in China and India. So I just want to highlight some of the ongoing and planned research programs in Nepal. So National Snow Leopard Population Survey is being planned for 2020 and 2021, covering all its potential snow leopard habitat in Nepal using camera trap and non-invasive genetic sampling. This is in planning phase. The finalization is yet to happen. And government has plans to collar 12 snow leopards with the GPS collar in western landscape, where I am working right now. 2 of the snow leopards were collared in Shey Phoksundo National Park in 2019, which I was like fortunate enough to be part of the team. And the full-fledged Snow Leopard Research Center is under construction in Kanchenjunga Conservation Area. It's due to be completed by next year. Now you can see the photograph of like this design of the Snow Leopard Research Center in Kanchenjunga Conservation Area. While I talked a lot about the current research efforts and the current research, like past research efforts and current research programs in Nepal, I just want to highlight the key research gaps in Nepal in terms of snow leopard studies. So the key research gap lies outside the protected areas, particularly in the potential corridors that I highlighted. These corridors are the potential, these landscapes are these places are the potential corridors that connect 3 snow leopard landscapes in Nepal. For example, it's a Charka, there's a Charka corridor between western landscape and central landscape. Our knowledge of snow leopard population status and distribution is very, very limited in these areas that lie outside the protected area. And roughly, like as I already mentioned, some 30 to 40% of the snow leopard habitat lies outside the current protected area system in Nepal. Yeah, while I summarized the milestone in snow leopard research in Nepal, I want to quickly focus on the conservation aspect, what has Nepal done over the years. So decades of 1970s to 1990s saw the establishment of protected areas. For example, Shey Phoksundo National Park was established in 1984, and the enactment of National Park Act was enacted in 1973. And this decade also saw the introduction of community-based like conservation efforts, like the introduction of buffer zone concept in 1996. And the decades of like early years of 21st century saw the first ever action plan focusing on snow leopards in Nepal in 2005. And the initiation of community-based conservation approach by establishing first community-managed conservation area in 2006, which is Kanchenjunga Conservation Area, that occurred in this decade. And the introduction of like community-managed livestock insurance scheme and saving and credit groups in Everest National Park are all main activities that were occurred between 2000 and 2010. And between 2013 and 2013, revision of the Snow Leopard Conservation Action Plan was adopted to adapt new research gaps and emerging threats, and participation in GSLAP process, identification of the 3 snow leopard landscapes to be secured by 2020 under GSLAP, and introduction of wildlife damage relief guideline to compensate for the livestock loss to snow leopard were all introduced in between 2010 and 2013. And I mean between these periods, and the recent last 5-6 years has been more instrumental in snow leopard research and conservation in Nepal. Snow Leopard Conservation Action Plan has been updated second time in 2017 to accommodate new plans, and government has been actively involved in GSLAs and PAUSE process, and MOU with China has been made for the transboundary collaboration, and the community managed institution has been strengthened to upscale the scale of the community-based conservation efforts. And the first ever climate smart management plan to address the climate change impacts has been introduced for eastern landscape, eastern leopard landscape recently. And I just want to highlight this. So Nepal is this is the first climate smart landscape management plan for snow leopard conservation ever in the world. And this is the evidence that the government of Nepal's high level of commitment to achieve snow leopard conservation. You can see like in this highlighted areas, snow leopard movement, the snow leopard home ranges based on 90% minimum convex polygon. It shows the significant transboundary movement between India and China. And this climate smart management plan aims to address the climate impacts in conjunction with other land use threats. So I just want to highlight the key policy documents for snow leopard conservation in Nepal over the years. So Nepal prepared first Snow Leopard Conservation Action Plan in 2004 September, and then it has been updated twice. And these documents provide strategic guidance for snow leopard conservation and research in Nepal. And Nepal has also been at the forefront of documenting the best practices. For example, it often publishes the manuals and guidelines. For example, in the center of this photograph, you can see the satellite telemetry on snow leopard. So this book documents the best practices experienced in snow leopard colony expedition in Kanchenjunga Conservation Area. So while I talked about the key milestone in research and conservation and the efforts made by the government of Nepal and current research works. So what have we learned over the years? So I think the key learning is that we need enabling government policy and conducive environments to get conservation activities done. And you see in Nepal has the conservation action plans in place, and we have field manuals to guide, and we have the acts and regulation, very strict acts and regulation. And these all policy documents provide very enabling working environment so that the researcher and the other activities can be done. So the other key learning that we have experienced over the years is that we need to capacitate local institutions, because these snow leopard landscapes are very rugged and the external presence for the long term is often very difficult. So we need to capacitate so that they can take ownership of their landscape, their habitat and their environment. So we have experienced that the capacitating local institutions like SLCCs, that stands for Snow Leopard Conservation Committees, is very, very vital to ensure snow leopard conservation. So what we have also experienced is that we need application of cutting edge technologies to advance our understanding of snow leopard biology and ecology, like using the satellite telemetry and non-invasive genetic and the camera traps. These has drastically improved our understanding of snow leopard biology. And what we have also experienced that the empowering local communities is also essential, and this requires activities and approaches that addresses their livelihood concerns, like the strengthening insurance scheme, and we have introduced compensation guidelines, saving and credit support for local communities, and improved corals. So while I talked about the experience, we have experienced key learnings over the years. I just want to quickly highlight some of the key challenges that I think current snow leopard conservation activities facing. So despite great success of pioneering study on snow leopard in Nepal, so we have so many challenges remain ahead. So I think the key challenge to snow leopard conservation is, at least I feel, is to balance the conservation versus development, because the development aspirations are growing in these otherwise the very untouched landscapes. This is because Nepal is already transitioned to federal system of government, and and the local government has the right to formulate their development plans, and the development aspirations are growing in these landscapes. A recent study commissioned by the WWF Nepal showed a significant impact of infrastructure on snow leopard habitat due to mostly due to habitat fragmentation due to linear infrastructure. For example, there are 13 corridors, like it's shown in this figure. There are 13 corridors. At least 10 of these corridors transverse to the snow leopard habitat. These corridors connect south to the north, like for example, from India to the China in the north. And this is a big challenge for snow leopard conservation in Nepal. So other key challenge is to ensure conservation of 30% of snow leopard habitat that currently lies outside the protected area system. And how to improve our knowledge base of snow leopards outside the protected areas in these landscapes is also one of the key challenges. So I think perhaps the most serious challenge to snow leopard conservation is to manage conflict over livestock predation. I assume you know a lot about, at least something about human snow leopard conflict. With limited experience I have, my feeling is that some level of predation is inevitable, and it is manifestation of different forms of conflict. And the challenge is now to identify ways to prevent and minimize conflict as much as possible, while offsetting some of the cost of predation cases. And I will discuss the potential way forward in the next slide. And the challenge would be to coexist with some level of the loss. And one of the other challenges is that despite nearly 4 decades of work, our knowledge on snow leopard is still limited. After all, do we know how many snow leopards we have accurately? At the very basic, how many snow leopards do we have? What is the exact potential habitat for snow leopard in Nepal? What is the status of wild prey base for snow leopard in Nepal? Do livestock population contribute to sustain snow leopard in some areas? Maybe, may not be. What is the genetic makeup of snow leopard in Nepal? Are there any genetic cluster? How diverse is the gene pool? If you ask these questions to a Nepali researcher working for last 4 years, my honest answer would be, I don't know really well. I can have a guess estimate based on field studies and expert knowledge, but I don't know really well. So with this, I want to discuss the few challenges, the challenges that remain. I just want to discuss the few opportunities that we have. So never before had we so much political will and resources, technology and expertise at our disposal to make snow leopard conservation a success story. The policy is so enabling that all of our national policy documents, be it national biodiversity strategy or action plan, have prioritized conservation agenda. We have a national snow leopard conservation action plan in place, just focusing on snow leopard. And like we have like enabling environment with the government, and the availability of cutting technologies has drastically advanced the opportunities to quickly obtain field data on snow leopard to advance research. So I think the availability of these research activities provides a very, very good opportunities. And recently there has been like global interest, and there is a renewal interest, and there has been global collaboration, and the global interest and collaboration, GSLEP and PAUSE and transboundary collaboration and YAMU with the Chinas. These interventions, these activities provides like the added dimension of the opportunities, and this has brought together global expertise that can be leveraged to for the snow leopard conservation. And I think we have very strong field institutions like SLCCs, like community managed protected area in Kanchenjunga conservation area. We have saving and credit groups. We have snow leopard scouts. These are very strong community institutions. We can leverage this support, and we can build on their strengths to make a positive change for snow leopard conservation. And having some 70% of the snow leopard habitat within the protected area system is also a great advantage in our case. So having said that, the challenge now again is to capitalize on these opportunities to bring about desired conservation outcome. So I think the potential with these opportunities, I think the potential way forward would be to first assimilate the learning of the past efforts and document the best practices and make the best use of the opportunities that I discussed recently. And I think some of the best way forwards would be to leverage, like, we know that the key challenges for snow leopard conservation is to maintain the development and conservation agenda. I think it is impossible for us to completely stop the development, and the winning strategy would be to leverage policy support for zero to minimum impact approach for infrastructure development. This can be done by convincing political leaders and civil society members and developing sustainable development guidelines for the local governments, because there are local governments that are in place in Nepal and they are very powerful, and we can empower them to maintain the environmental stewardship and managing the EIA, the environmental impact assessment compliances, and this would enable, like, this would help to overcome the challenges of maintaining development and conservation. So I think to address the knowledge gap, I think we need to advance research and monitoring, applying the latest technologies while retaining boots on the ground. We should not forget the natural importance of natural history and the being in the field and getting more field data. And I think to addressing human wildlife conflict will require sound understanding of local dynamics of predation and park people conflict and park people relations. We know that snow leopard varies. Snow leopard predation livestock varies from some 3% to 12% across the snow leopard landscape. So I therefore feel that the one-hand strategy will fail to yield desired outcome. Better approach would be thus to tailor multi-pronged strategies with local and social dynamics. And I think we need to adapt on the local situation, and while strengthening the community-based like insurance scheme if that works. And I think conserving snow leopards outside the protected area will require capacitating local governments, because we don't have protected area there, and very few people want protected areas, and expanding protected area would be like very hard fight strategy. So I feel the best bet is to empower local government to declare some of the areas as like minimum economic zone or like wildlife protection zone, and capacitating them technically and showing them some innovative like ideas and benefit via ecotourism would be better strategy. And of course, like to realize the conservation goals, I think it's vital that we strengthen the transboundary collaboration, because collaborating will bring multiple expertise and knowledge action, and that will help conserve the snow leopards in the large landscapes. So while I spoke about Nepal today, I think we may be missing something fundamental to every conservation enterprise. This is that while looking at the bigger picture of snow leopard conservation, we often forget the local dynamics of individual snow leopard landscapes or the protected area. With few years of experience now, I feel like conservation is more of a socioeconomic enterprises rather than just scientific. We know snow leopard landscapes are physically rugged and heterogeneous and remote. So are the socio-cultural, economic and political dynamics and the priorities of the communities that live there for millennia. And with open market and development aspiration penetrating to these otherwise very untouched landscapes, the heterogeneity has become much more acute. And understanding these multiple layers of heterogeneity in terms of socio-political dynamics and acknowledging the struggle of these mountain communities toward the pursuit of prosperity and building on their existing strength and to make them stewards of their mountains would be the best way forward for snow leopard conservation, I think. And adapting to these hard social realities, I mean, like the multiple social dynamics, and integrating science and social dimension would be like the better way forward for snow leopard conservation in Nepal, at least, I guess. Thank you. I mean, if you have any questions and concerns and comments, I would be very happy to answer, and Som sir would add on that.
Thank you, Gopal. That was such an impressive presentation, both in content. You covered so much ground, and it was also really interesting. So thank you so much. So please, if the audience can share any comments in or thoughts in the chat, feel free. While we wait for questions, I want to, maybe Som, you can comment on Gopal's last thoughts, because I think he was touching upon the need to respect cultures, respect people and communities, and you've done a lot of work in community conservation. So if you have any first thoughts related to that or anything to share with the group.
Okay, hello everybody. Yes, I mean, like in Nepal, what we have seen is ecosystem approach of snow leopard conservation started since 1970s, you know, like Gopal said, by establishing the first national park for snow leopard, conserving snow leopard, you know, like conserving biodiversity as a whole in Shey Phoksundo National Park was out there, but the whole point of protecting, or whole point of establishing Shey Phoksundo National Park was, to focus on snow leopard and conserve snow leopard, because that's what George Saller, emphasized. I mean, like the first snow leopard study in Pakistan, also in Nepal, by George Saller, and that was a species approach. I mean, that was ecosystem approach conservation, nothing to do with people participation, that sort of thing. It was ecosystem approach, like establishing national park. But then later that moved into in 1980s, mostly in early 1990s onward. Then people participation in biodiversity conservation and snow leopard conservation in those areas where snow leopards are found. That was actually started since early 90s in Annapurna conservation area, and also later in early 2000 in Kanchenjunga. Then we started actually, we started involving local people to conserve snow leopard. Like in Gopal said, I mean, it's not only nature, of course, that area is, natural, naturally rugged, beautiful, it's a vista, it's a landscape, it's like huge area of importance in terms of biodiversity. But then there are people with, all kinds of cultural traditions, all kinds of, practices. And that's how the government of, that was realized, government of Nepal and other institutions, WWF, and also, King Mahendra Trust, once upon a time, King Mahendra Trust, now National Trust for Nature Conservation, realized the importance of local, local participation, local involvement in conserving biodiversity and snow leopard. So then onwards, actually, the real integrated conservation and development approaches in snow leopard conservation started. That was in 1990s. Then 2000 onwards, the mix kinds of strategy was used. Then comes this comes under species approach. Like you focus on species. It's like, okay, you have an ecosystem. You establish a protected area across the country. That's your ecosystem approach. But then comes, if you are in Tarai, if you are in lowland Tarai, then you focus on tiger. If you are up in the mountains, in the Himalaya, then you focus on snow leopard. In the middle hill, maybe on common leopard. So that's what the government of Nepal, along with other institutions and conservation institutions, have been doing in northern Nepal. Focus on snow leopard in a species approach. And there are other programs. I mean, like when we say that integrated conservation and development program, species approach, yes, conservation. Then, now what do we mean by species approach conservation in Nepal, in northern Nepal? There are facets of activities going on. Like Gopal said, Snow Leopard Scouts program is going on there. Savings and credit programs are going on there. And compensation programs are going on there. Insurance programs are going on there. So these things, I think we need to expand more so that we cover the whole Nepal. So that's the thing, actually.
No, thank you, Som. That really helped. And I think that we have a question from Rishi that kind of builds on what you were just sharing. This is for a question for you, Gopal. Given the diversity, and for you, Som, if you care also to answer, given the diversity of communities, their perspective and their aspirations, is there any broad consensus or common ground on potential conservation issues amongst communities? Do you have any thoughts, Gopal?
Yeah, I think with my limited experience over the years, particularly in 3 landscapes, I have been to the Apinampa Conservation Area and Kanchenjunga Conservation Area right now in Shey Phoksundo National Park. Well, these landscapes are very different in terms of their socio-political dynamics, and well, although the culture would be common, like there would be Buddhist communities, but the local dynamics is very different. So what I feel, the common consensus in terms of the local communities, what they feel is that they want to see something in return. I don't know, so if you ask them to conserve snow leopard just for, okay, snow leopard is beautiful, I mean, it doesn't matter much for them. So whenever I interact with the local communities, whatever times they have seen snow leopards, the main concern will be, what will snow leopard conservation bring to us in these rugged landscapes, where there is no phone, no internet, so you have to walk 7 days if your kids get sick. So all they don't want to destroy their landscape. They want to preserve their landscape because they see the benefit through it. So they want to see some sort of everybody the consensus is that they want to see some sort of benefit through snow leopard conservation, because they want prosperity. Over the years, the landscapes have been very untouched and very remote. And I think the broad consensus is that they want to see some sort of benefit, and they would be very happy to protect their landscape because they know it's there, and they know that a snow leopard is found in their places, not in Terai, and they want to protect their landscape, and they know protecting their environment will also help downstream communities. They know that if they protect their watershed, it is going to feed water to the downstream communities. And while there is a broad consensus in terms of that we need to conserve this landscape and the species, for sure that the opinions may differ and the social dynamics may differ. And that's why we need to adapt on those local realities. For example, in some landscapes, now people are slowly transitioning from pastoralism to the tourism. In Dolpa, in Lower Dolpa, when Phoksundo, people are slowly transitioning into ecotourism. And their feeling is that now our livelihood will depend on ecotourism, and their perception is different than the Upper Dolpa people who are now still predominantly depend on the pastoralism. So it's different in Annapurna Conservation Area, where there is Annapurna is one of the biggest, one of the most beautiful trekking routes. So the perception might differ, the social realities might differ, but I think whatever I have explained, everybody wants, local communities wants to preserve their like the snow leopards and their landscape. Yeah.
And do some approaches also incorporate some of the climate change issues you talked about? So it's almost 3 phases: addressing snow leopard, climate change, and local well-being and economic stability. Is there examples of that in Nepal that you can give as well?
So yeah, so we have climate smart management plan in place. So we need to, like, so for example, we know that Nepal is one of the most vulnerable country in terms of to the impacts of climate change, and but our knowledge base regarding the impact of climate change on snow leopard habitat or the snow leopard directly is very limited. The impacts of climate change will be first felt by those communities that live alongside the snow leopard, and I think that's why the management plan that we have, it tries to addresses those impacts that are directly felt by local communities, because it tries to integrate both the social component and like the scientific component of that, the glacial lake outburst flood, or the glacier melting, or the temperature rise and shifting of tree-line vegetation. So this plan tries to integrate all of those, both social aspect and the like the ecological aspect. And I hope, like, again, like, I hope this plan can make a difference. But again, the success depends upon our will and government efforts and local community efforts to implement it and adapt to these changes. And yeah, I think.
Great, thank you. Because we're getting a flood of questions, I'm just going to move on to the next question to make sure we answer it. There was a question by Gustav related to Western Nepal, and he seemed to, from the images of the collaring snow leopards, it appeared they seemed to use the valleys and not the high kind of elevated areas. Is there, he's just asking if the snow leopards tend to prefer these low elevations, and what elevation are the areas of Western Nepal?
So far, so I have seen data from both Eastern and Western landscape. I haven't like the full analysis of the Eastern landscape data, but I have some data of the Western landscape. So in Eastern landscapes, the snow leopard has moved from like Nepal to India and China. I guess whatever I have read from like the technical reports that are available out there. So these are the dispersing individuals, like the sub-adults snow leopards, and they have seen, like, they have moved frequently from Nepal to India, and some, like one of the snow leopard stayed for some 1-2 months, some 56 or 57 days outside the country, outside Nepal. So but in Western Nepal, we don't have such movements. So we don't have enough data of like 1 year of data. We just have like 5-6 months of data, and I think it would be like, I think it would be unwise to make any inference of just 5 months of data, but we don't have any transboundary movement, any long range movement in comparison to the East. It's very low. If you compare 5 months of data from the Eastern Nepal and 5 months of data from the Western Nepal, the movement is very low. Maybe the difference could be explained by the difference in the body size or the age category of individual snow leopards. Maybe the prey availability could differ in these landscapes. I think right now I may not be able to make any broad inferences, but for sure the landscape is, again, the landscape and the vegetation patterns differ in these two landscapes. The Eastern landscape has very different vegetation pattern, and the vegetation line starts like somehow between like around 4,000, but in the Western Nepal, in Dolpa, it's around 4,000 to 3,600. So I think the prey diversity also differs. There are many factors that could be like, that could make difference. But I think, yeah, the snow leopards in Eastern landscapes has moved a lot in comparison to Western landscape.
Okay, and they are using mostly the valleys or also the ridge lines traveling in terms of traveling?
Yeah, what I feel, the snow leopard landscape, at least in Dolpa, it's very rugged, and we have seen snow leopards traveling across the same route. Like they frequently travel along the same, the ridge lines and the valley bottoms. I don't know much about the Eastern landscape because I haven't seen the data myself, but whatever I have read from the report, it appears more or less similar. Yeah, but the snow leopard landscape is very rugged in Western landscape.
Okay, Justin, can can I say something?
Go for
Okay.
it.
I have some experience from Mount Everest, where my, study based on science, though, all, like scrapes, pugmark, feces collections, and all that. So the same pattern, actually, Gopal, in eastern Nepal also, Mount Everest, same pattern. They travel along the ridge line and also the valley bottom. And also, on top of that, these snow leopards actually also use human trails. Like along the human trails, livestock trails, they move along those trails also. So that's like, I mean, it's the same pattern like in Western Nepal or in Eastern Nepal. And now, when I said something about livestock, now let me, like I and Gopal, we were talking about in this thing that, like distribution and abundance of snow leopards in Nepal, what's happening, what would happen to the populations and all that. Now, what I have realized is like we have been always trying to reduce people, livestock, people, wildlife conflict, livestock should be reduced or herding patterns should be improved in order to, in order for not snow leopards not to kill livestock. That all those strategies that we mentioned in paper, reducing people wildlife conflict or snow leopard, people conflict, or snow leopard livestock conflict, whatever you say, that is related to livestock. But then what I've realized is if livestock number declines, if livestock number decreases in those rugged mountains, now on the basis of prey numbers are decreasing in those areas, like prey declining situation, snow leopard will not thrive. So our strategy actually should be, our future strategy should be to actually, increase livestock numbers, and then, try to compensate whenever snow leopards are killed, whenever livestock is killed by snow leopards, give them compensation. That's how I think things would, work. And snow leopard population might be maintained or increased.
Okay, so maintaining the prey and livestock for local community. So that comes to another question we were coming on here, Som, which is related to, someone is asking, okay, we need to empower, a question by BBAC, we need to empower local governments in a way that protects snow leopards in regions outside protected areas. But at the same time, the local government have aspirations for development. One of the challenges Gopal said. So this new emerging threat of development, of infrastructure, encroachment into snow leopard areas, how can you find that balance of, in terms of at least local government supporting them, is a question we have here. So maybe
Yeah.
and then we can go to Som on your thoughts. Yeah.
So based on my limited understanding of interaction with the local governments, at least in Dolpa, so I think, yeah, of course there is a middle ground. I also outlined that a way forward is in my presentation, that so empowering local government is possible. Like when you engage them, when you like try to convince them proactively, when they see the benefit through it. Because the problem again, like the very big problem is very few local governments know the importance of wildlife, because that's not their main like priorities. But for example, in like one of the local governments is a Shey Phoksundo rural municipality. It lies completely within the core area of national park, and the local government has been so supportive that they have allocated good amount of money for like community based insurance scheme. And that means that outside the protected area as well, if we empower them, like for example, they will see the benefit through it, like, so if we have like sustainable development guidelines, like if we have like the local government has land use plans, if we can convince them that the land use plans can be made in such a way that they could allocate some areas of wildlife protection zone, and this is your this is the like sort of good mark for your local communities, and this is you have the snow leopards, that's good for your local government. If we can convince them, like by showing them some benefits, like it's your place is good and your place is very special, something like that. I think there is of course a middle ground, and nobody wants excavator and those big roads in these mountains, because people know that like small mountainous trails with the trekking trails are very important, and nobody, like very few people will want like the big roads. And there is of course middle ground. What they want is some sort of prosperity. They want their kids to be educated. They want good hospitals. It's not all about the road. I know they want road, because I am the park, like I am also like practitioner as an administrator. I know that many people want the roads, but they don't want big roads, like the big infrastructure, like at the cost of their ecological integrity. They know the importance of their natural environment. I guess we can convince if we engage them very well from the very beginning. Yeah.
And Som, do you have any thoughts on these emerging threats, such as development or climate change, that might, and how to address it?
No, I mean, like in Nepal, I think, the history tells us that since 1970s, it's a livestock, people-wildlife conflict. It's that conflict, that's the biggest threat. And that threat still is out there. But then on top of that, yes, I mean, climate change and also, infrastructure development like road, that is adding some problems. That's for sure. But then there is always balance. We can always balance. I mean, it's not that, we can stop, like building roads along those snow leopard habitats. I mean, people want roads, definitely. But then, there are always, balance. How do we balance conservation versus development? That's always there. There's always options. So I think, I'm not very much worried about that, but we have to emphasize on, again, reducing, the people-wildlife conflict. That's how snow leopards, are being in some places. Not now, they're not parading snow leopard carcass once snow leopards were killed. That I saw in early 90s, snow leopard were killed in remote areas. And then the carcass were, paraded, along the street of the village streets. That practice has stopped. But still, there are, some corners, there are some remote areas, snow leopards are being poisoned because they kill their livestock. So, we still have to emphasize on people-wildlife conflict. But on top of that, yes, other threats.
That comes to another question, Som, related to what capacities of local institutions and communities can be built. So both of you have talked about needing to build and enhance people's capacities in terms of communities, so like in agroforestry. So is there more specific examples you can share in terms of building people's capacities? Either one of you, please go for it.
Go ahead, Gopal, please.
Yeah. So I think we need to capitalize on the existing capacities that they have. For example, at least in like the Phoksundo, like the Rigmo village, I think the plant ecotourism would benefit them, and we need to capacitate them on like the finding the market, like the how to serve the market, how to bring more, like at least the nature-based tourists. And like for those communities that are in like outside the protected areas, we need to first make them convince and make them aware of the importance of their landscapes. Very few people they know that snow leopard is there, and they know these are the water resources, but simply it doesn't get in their priority list. So I think it's a different dimension for the people like in Annapurna, in Manang, where the tourism is growing. We need to capitalize on their ecotourism potential. Like for example, Phoksundo Lake, and there would be the snow leopard trail could be there, and they could generate income from those resources. And for the people who are in the upper Dolpa, where still the pastoralism is a predominant form of like the land use, and in those landscapes, just bringing ecotourism is very difficult. And for the timing, I think the best way forward would be to at least try to capitalize on their earning potentials. Like for example, right now they have livestock, and that gets like predated by snow leopard, and offsetting the cost will be one way forward. And another way forward would be to at least provide a good education, and because they want their children to be educated, and they have and there are like at least some basic needs. There are some alternative livelihood opportunities. It could be like the greenhouse, like for example, right now we are supporting the corals, and there are like local government is supporting for the greenhouses to grow good crops. And I think we need to first understand what could be the best way in those local villages. And every village is different in terms of what they grow, what the social dynamics, and what they eat, and like and the potential has every landscape has different potential. So I think we need to understand those realities. At least I know Phoksundo, and I think I think we need to understand those local realities and try to capacitate on that.
Thanks, Gopal.
I think I'm talking in terms of building their capacities for livelihood improvement, not in terms of like snow leopard research, and that's a very different perspective.
Yeah, of course, for conservation applications. So, and Som, there have been a few questions related to the insurance programs, and I know you're very familiar with insurance programs related to snow leopards ever since the 90s. So do you have any last comments? Maybe this is our last question to you, Som, related to building capacities in the insurance program. What kind of capacities needs to be enhanced, and how have the insurance programs evolved over the last 20 or 30 years?
No, to be very frank, I was not involved on insurance programs. I mean, it started in Kanchenjunga. In Mount Everest, yes, we tried to establish insurance program, but that was partial insurance program. Let's say insurance program was built in order to compensate if any livestock get killed by snow leopard, compensate them. That was that's the primary reason why insurance program was established. In Kanchenjunga, I think Gopal knows about, little bit about, the program in Kanchenjunga. But in Mount Everest, what is happening, that I can tell you. So we created actually on Mount Everest, now here I mentioned, Kingman, okay, National Trust for Nature Conservation, National Leopard Conservancy. I used to represent, maybe, 6-7 years ago, with the permission of Department of National Park and Wildlife Conservation, we started actually savings and credit program on Mount Everest. And savings and credit program is nothing but you provide them some seed money, and then every month, then members of that village, you create some kind of savings and credit program, and all the villagers should be member, or at least 90%. The villagers should be member in that committee. So it's at every month they will, contribute some money. So that would be their savings. So then that money would be added into the seed money, and that money will be then, used for some business purpose by some individuals from that committee. And what we, then built, the mechanism was then whatever net profit, it's not, just the net profit. You take the net profit, 25% of net profit should go to snow leopard, conservation. That means insurance. Whenever, not insurance, sorry, compensation. So whenever livestock gets killed, then that money will be, spent in order to compensate livestock loss. So that was how we built. 25%, okay, 25%. And then villagers actually there use 15% to compensate livestock loss, 10% they spend in education. So that was really nice on Mount Everest. So that was the thing on Mount Everest. And then we started actually maybe $5,000, okay? Just $5,000. In Nepalese currency, 500, 1,000 Nepalese currency. We started with that $5,000. But now what I have, heard was, one of the communities on Mount Everest, because they built on that, every month they, invested money at savings. Now they have $30,000. Now, can you believe in those remote areas, they have built from $5,000. Now they have $30,000. Now imagine net profit from that $30,000. So they are doing good. So that's the story from Mount Everest. I think, from Kanchenjunga, maybe, Gopal would say something about incidents.
Thanks. Yeah, we actually were running kind of short on time, and this is kind of really fascinating discussion, and there's so much to share, as I can see, and so many more questions coming in. So I just wanted to ask before we end, if there are any last thoughts that, I don't know, Gopal and Som, you wanted to share, or answer any last questions you had seen in the chat that you were eager to share with the group. Please, if you could just take a minute or so to share, and then we'll wrap up. So feel free to, Gopal, over to you maybe before we end.
Yeah. So one of my main thoughts that I feel very, very important is that I also highlighted at the last slide of my presentation, is that these landscapes are very rugged, and we need to understand the local dynamics very, very minutely. And with the development aspirations, like growing very, very, very highly. So we need to understand those local reality. And it's not just the scientific enterprise, it's both of science and like the socioeconomic and the cultural part also. So to conserve snow leopard is different than to do research on snow leopard. We need to integrate both. And we really need to address those threats, like collaborating with local governments and local institutions. If they take ownership, look, it's over over 5 decades of snow leopard research, we still know very, very little on snow leopard. We still don't know how many snow leopards are there in Nepal. But this hasn't prevented, I don't mean that the snow leopard research is not required, but I also mean that if our main aim right now in some landscape is to conserve snow leopards, we need to focus on local governments, local protect areas, local communities, and build their capacity so that they can take ownership. For example, in Kanchenjunga, we have some 100 plus snow leopard, like local herders, being trained as citizen scientists. They know how to operate camera traps. They know how to do double observation. It's local asset, and we can't forget them. We have to build on that. So for both research and conservation. So I think it's a multifaceted problem. Is again, for example, in comment box, Rishi sir also told that these landscapes are very very rugged, and there are also the social cultural difference, and how could you find the middle ground in terms of development and conservation. And we need to engage very minutely, and we need to understand local realities. I think that would be the good way forward. And we are forgetting these dimensions. I think whenever we look at the bigger picture, we are forgetting this. We may be forgetting. I'm not saying we are forgetting, but we may be forgetting these local dynamics. And we really need to capacitate local communities. That would be my one of the main.
Thank you, Gopal. No, that's a great message. And Som, over to you. Any last thoughts to add and share with the group before we end?
Yes, I mean, let me, tell you one thing that, in 1970s, like Gopal mentioned, George Saller, and then, all the, government people, National Park, staff, how they made efforts to, for the first time, established snow leopard, protected area, Shey Phoksundo. Then, 1980s, Rodney Jackson's work, but then we should not be forgetting, it's not only Rodney Jackson's work there. There were some, Nepalese, co-investigator, Karan Shah. Karan Shah worked with, Rodney. And actually, I was close with Karan Shah, and Karan Shah actually trained me. He showed me the first snow leopard, pug mark. He was the one who showed me. Then later, I worked with Rodney, and he trained me. That's there, okay? So in 1990s, early 90s, up to early 90s, there was nobody in Nepal, okay, on snow leopard work. It's maybe Karan Shah, and maybe I started being active. But what I see now is, this is 2020. So many active workers Gopal. It's not like you can count. There are many. Okay. Now it's just mixed. It's mixed things really interesting and makes me happy, or makes the snow leopard community happy, that there are so many snow leopard workers in Nepal. And that said, okay, 70% areas, the snow leopard areas, inside protected area. Now we have 30%. So we have to emphasize on that 30% outside protected area. Now in that 30%, what I suggest is, or like what we've been talking about this is, inside protected areas, yes, like you have a army established, like they protect snow leopard or biodiversity, all kinds of management, integrated conservation and development, like Gopal mentioned, that is happening in those protected areas, whether national park or conservation areas. Now, outside the park, what we should be doing is, like Gopal mentioned, I mean, it's like, there are citizen scientists being trained in those, like in areas, Annapurna Conservation Area, or Kanchenjunga, or in other places. Those citizen scientists, whether they are students or herders, they should be or will be mobilized to those areas where there is a gap, the corridor. Now that corridor, there are 2 protected areas, and then you have a corridor, okay? I mean, that gap. So that gap will, in order to think, a bigger scale, landscape level. So now 2 protected area will be connected by biological corridor. All right, biological corridor, so that snow leopards travel. But then whenever snow leopard travel along those unprotected areas, then they must be protected also. They must be conserved. They must be safe. So now what I suggest is, like when we train local people in those unprotected areas, then we will be creating not only biological corridor, but then social corridor. I would say social corridor. So we have a biological corridor, and we will also create social corridor by educating those people. I think that should be the strategy.
Thank you, Som. I think both you and Gopal are very much aligned, and it was great to bring these perspectives together from more newer perspectives of Gopal's working from there, and those perspectives from the past and present. So thank you. It was a really interesting presentation. We have gone over time, but I let us do that because, and I hope that was okay, Gopal, that we took, and so we took your extra time just because it was such an interesting presentation. But I'm glad we didn't lose you, Gopal, as we know that your internet connection is not so reliable where you are. But I really appreciate that you were able to link in with us from where you're working in the field and provide us direct updates directly from the field, because this, in some of the most remote parts of the world. And I think that SLN, we hope that we can create more of these kind of opportunities of more sharing and connecting across different levels, different countries. So thank you so much for allowing us to have this immediate access to your experiences and best practices. We learned a lot today, and I'm seeing from the chat that everyone was very pleased to hear from you. So thank you both so much. Me and Reki are so happy that you were able to join us today. Thank you.